Okay, it's just going through to live stream now, so all is clear and you can begin the meeting.
Good evening, members. Good evening, members of the public, if there are any watching at this stage. Good evening, officers. Welcome to the Planning Applications Committee on the 18th of June. Firstly, can I have apologies?
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillors Morley, Betton and Garrett. Councillor Paul Deach is subbing Councillor Sean Garrett today.
Thank you very much for joining in, Paul, at quite short notice, I understand. The minutes were circulated. Are you happy that I signed the minutes of the last meeting?
Agreed.
Thank you. Declarations we will deal with on each item, and so we go first to item number 1 on page 3, which is 24 Park Avenue, Camberley. On declarations, I assume most other people or everybody else had correspondence from various parties relating to this application, and secondly, Councillor Morley has asked me to present her. Apologies, she lives close to the site and therefore she has a declarable pecuniary interest. Are there any other declarations to make? Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, this site's on my ward. I've been consulted by several of the residents and I've also attended a presentation by the developer, although the presentation I was at doesn't appear to be the same as the plans we're seeing tonight.
Just confirm you are still at this meeting with an open mind.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Any other declarations to make? No, thank you. And then Mrs. Bishop, please.
Thank you, Chair. Let's see if the technology will work.
Wait 1 second, Teresa.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
The application site is to the south of Park Avenue. It currently comprises a large detached dwelling with extensive rear gardens. These are pictures of the application site. This is the existing dwelling on the site. As you will see, it has been hoarded. This is looking from inside the site out from the access at the eastern end of the site. This is gives you an indication of the street trees that are particularly relevant in relation to the highway representation and objection. This is a picture of Park Avenue. A lot of residents have commented on the overall width, and it is quite narrow as a thoroughfare. And looking at, we have a car park there, and I was actually parked on the road. This is looking from the bottom of the site up towards 22 Park Avenue. So that's the existing building, and 22 Park Avenue is over there. Then we go round the site. We're now looking at from the house down the site. So we have the properties there at 13 to 17 Kingsley Avenue, and these properties here are 31 to 35 Kingsley Avenue. This is looking from the site up, so that's the building that's already on the site, and this is looking towards 26 Park Avenue, which is there, and the Kingsley Avenue properties here. And this is just a view of the application site as on the day of my site visit. As you will see, it is sort of devoid of a lot of vegetation. The proposal before us this evening is for the demolition of the existing property and the erection of 4 detached houses. There is an update in relation to Unit 2, which is this one, and this is slightly different from the plans you have in your pack, in that a very small link there was already a link here, and this has been extended forward to facilitate the provision of an entrance hall and a front door, which will to address part of one of the concerns in recent refusal 1. And as you'll see from the update sheet, we are looking to slightly amend that part of the reason for refusal. We have 2 houses on the frontage, so we have 22 Park Avenue here, 26 Park Avenue here, and we have 2 houses on the frontage. The existing access is an in-out arrangement. The easternmost one is going to be widened to form the access down here to serve the 2 houses at the back. There is a new access formed here to serve Unit 2. As you will see, that there is the access road. We have a turning area here with garaging and parking for this unit here, and garaging and parking for this unit here. These are the houses 1 and 2. They follow basically the Surrey vernacular. As you can see, they have the gables, they have the use of render, traditional tarred roof. And this is the planting plan that has been submitted as part of the application. A lot of the representations have commented on the accuracy of the plans, but obviously a judgment will be made. And as you'll see from a later update relating to trees, we can give appropriate weight to that submitted plan. This is the proposed street scene from Park Avenue. Again, the street trees are of note simply because of the issue relating to the highway objection. And this is a CGI that's been submitted by the applicant in support of the application. I think in some ways it clearly demonstrates how out of character the 2 houses at the back of the site are. We have a central road which is completely uncharacteristic of this part of Camberley, and the relationships in terms of where you expect to see built form, it is characterised by gardens, and we have 2 big houses at the back. So again, to my mind, that demonstrates very well the concerns that we are raising in terms of the pattern of development. There is an update to the report, and it's quite a detailed one, so I'll go through them. They are on the update sheet, which I believe members have seen. I've gone through the change to Unit 2. The drainage officer has confirmed that in the event that planning permission were to be granted, his concerns could be dealt with by way of condition. We have had 6 further representations to this proposal, including 1 duplicate, which talk about the impact on the trees. We've also had photos of the trees, including those are showing 3 that are actually dying on the site now, and also pictures of a couple of cars trying to turn on Park Avenue. The noise arising from the M3 as a result of the tree removal last year. The development is just inappropriate for the area. Lack of notification for 22 Park Avenue and misleading landscape plans. With regard to the question of notification, I would say that our records indicate that a letter was sent out on the 30th of January this year. As you'll see, we're looking to amend reason for refusal 1 by the deletion of the words the orientation of Unit 2, given that we now have a front door in the front elevation facing Park Avenue. In the report itself, we talk about an update both on highway grounds and on tree grounds. Well, there's been detailed conversations and correspondence between the council's arboricultural consultant and the applicants. They have still not come to a situation where we feel that we have had the information that we need to make an appropriate assessment of the impact of the development on trees. And I think this is neatly pointed out by the pictures provided by the resident that show that 3 trees are also dying above and beyond that was shown in our submissions. So on that basis, we are recommending a further reason for refusal number 3 as set out on the amendment sheet, on grounds that we haven't had the information that we need. So we believe that it hasn't been satisfactorily demonstrated that the proposal would not have an adverse impact on trees within and adjoining the site. You'll also note from the committee agenda that we were also, the applicant was also liaising with the County Highway Authority over the matter of a speed survey. Now we understand that various surveys were being undertaken in Park Avenue. However, as of close of business today, no information has been submitted to the council in this respect, despite seeking further clarification from the agent. So on that basis, we are recommending reason for refusal number 4, which reinstates the County Highway original objection. We don't have, the County Highway Authority do not have the information to come to review whether or not those sight lines would be appropriate for the visibility slate, particularly with regard to the street trees in Park Avenue. The issues are as set out in the report. We look at the character of the area, residential amenity, the highways and the parking issues, which I've highlighted here, and the SPA. The recommendation is to refuse, subject to the additional reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bishop. Very comprehensive. Thank you for that.
Can I just mention something? Just for the record, Councillor Graham Tapp has now joined us midway through the Office of Presentation, and unfortunately, because that's during the consideration of the item, you won't be able to vote on this item. Sorry about that, Councillor Tapper.
Yes, okay, I understand. It was the problem with having to swap my machines over because of the problems with the agenda not working on the iPad. So I've had to reverse my normal procedures. It's taken me a bit of time to get it sorted out, I'm afraid. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. We have 2 speakers, inverted commas, on this item. Who's leading the videos? Is the first one, I believe, is Ms. Lizzie Beresford, but it may not be. The screen is blank. How does he stand on that?
Dear Chair and members of the committee, my name is Lizzie Beresford and I am a senior planner at Marans Planning. I'm speaking to represent residents of Park Avenue and Kingsley Avenue who wish to strongly object to this application. The application has rightly received a high volume of public interest, which started long before the application was submitted, when the developer brazenly removed in excess of 180 designated and established trees. The removal of such trees had no regard for the existing ecology or wildlife and has, as a result, caused significant and irreversible damage to what DEFRA had designated as a high priority woodland improvement area. When this application was submitted, just months after, it was evident that the act of such destruction was to remove any reason for the LPA to object to a proposal in relation to the retention of trees and the protection of wildlife, an act that shows a clear intent to try and cheat the planning system. Upon reviewing the details submitted as part of the application, it is not just the removal of trees that causes significant concern. Highway safety, loss of privacy, impact on the street scene, and significant overdevelopment are just some of the impacts that this development will cause. The development proposals must be considered within the context of the surrounding area. Park Avenue is a residential road consisting of large, detached dwellings with spacious rear gardens. There is a strong front and rear building line with dwellings that are set back from the road and screened from the view of the roadside. Located within the Hedged Estates Character Area Plan, the area is characterised by its very green and regimented layout and appearance with generous plots. We are not trying to suggest that the developer has not managed to squeeze 4 plots into the site. However, this is at the expense of the development being entirely contrary to the existing and established character of the surrounding area. 4 plots on the site will result in a complete departure from the existing building line, a consequence that has been resisted at both planning and appeal level in so many cases in the surrounding neighbourhood. The increase from 1 large dwelling with open and spacious grounds to 4 cramped units with a shared drive and small gardens would irreversibly alter the pattern, massing and density of built development beyond recognition. This is in direct conflict with an array of policies and guidance both at national and local level. Turning specifically to the detail proposed, the orientation of Plot 2 conveys significant concern whereby it fronts onto Park Avenue. This is in clear contrast to the established character of Park Avenue and guiding principle 6.2 of the Residential Design Guide SPD. The location of the parking provision for Plot 4 is also wholly contrary to policy, whereby it is located directly forward of the front elevation with minimal soft landscaping to soften the visual impact of this large area of hard standing, again in contrast to principle 6.8 of the SPD. A context plan with plot sizes has been uploaded to the public access page, which allegedly illustrates that the plots within the Hedged Estates character area are smaller than the average plot proposed under this application. However, this calculation is entirely misleading, as there is a difference of 758 square metres between the smallest plot and the largest plot proposed under this application. Finally, Surrey County Council Highways advised that the recommended visibility displays could not be achieved, and therefore there was an objection on the basis of highway safety. A speed survey was subsequently requested with the proviso that this should be carried out post-lockdown for the results to be truly representative. It has been brought to our attention that despite this advice, traffic monitoring equipment was put in place along Park Avenue at the end of May. This again demonstrates the developer's clear lack of regard to undertake works in accordance with recommended guidance. Thank you for your time, and I trust this information is helpful to you and that you fully endorse the officer's recommendation to refuse this application.
I'm not sure if you're on listening to this, Ms. Beresford, but thank you very much indeed for that. You escaped because we can't ask you any questions. So we'll move on to the second speaker, which is Mrs. Brenzini.
Good evening, all council members and those watching via the live broadcast on YouTube. I hope everyone is well during these unusual times. My name is Rio Bronzini and I'm a resident on Park Avenue along with my husband and children. Today I speak not just for myself but also on behalf of 16 neighbouring households. The huge environmental destruction that has taken place at number 24 over the last 12 months has already caused an enormously negative impact on the environment. The residents and the local communities previously enjoyed by your constituents. Add the stress endured by all those throughout this arduous planning process, I speak today to convey we all wholeheartedly agree with your planning officer, Sarita Bishop's recommendation to refuse. As you are aware, and as identified by Ms. Bishop, this application has caused huge concern and distress within the local community. Some 478 objections received to date. This significant amount should stand as testament to the public interest and feelings towards the planning application. Ms. Bishop identified the great deal of concern in the local community with regards to the loss of some 180 mature trees, the same week that Surrey Council declared the first of 2 climate emergencies. While this may not be material to current planning application, we believe this was to circumvent your rules to protect the environment and our community, policy CP 14A. The destruction was performed over a weekend when residents were unable to obtain council's assistance. I now present to you the scale of the destruction in these images. The trees were not simply felled. An industrial digger ripped up the tree roots and animal dens on the plot. Consequently, these actions have ensured that no wildlife would return and an additional 3 trees will be lost. Furthermore, a recent planting report earmarks even more trees to be felled, over 40 in total, contrary to that noted in paragraph 7.4.13 of Ms. Bishop's report. Further distress has been caused through a severe 3-fold increase in road noise from the M3, evidenced by before and after readings. This has resulted in material harm to the character of the area. Numerous applications of this type over the recent years have all been rejected or withdrawn after huge public outcry and with the support from your officers. It is blatantly evident that residents of Surrey Heath and yourselves, our councillors, have had enough of such proposals, and this is another opportunity to tell unscrupulous profiteering developers that this is not acceptable in our borough. I must also note with disappointment that my husband and I have to date received no formal letters from the council about 24 Park Avenue, including the letter about this very meeting. The developer has acted with blatant disregard to the hedged estate area, in particular where it states trees and vegetation worthy of retention should be retained, as it is widely acknowledged fact that there were species of trees such as chestnut and oak, which were worthy of retention among the 180 destroyed. As Ms Bishop's report states, this planning application does not abide by the hedged estates character area, the CP2 of the Sustainable Development and Design, DM9 of the Surrey Heath Core Strategy and Development Plan for the Borough, Guiding Principles HE1, 2, 3 of the Western Urban Character Supplementary, MPPF paragraph 127. Furthermore, the positioning of the houses in the planning application are in contravention to principles 4.1, 6.2, 6.6, 7.1, 7.4 and 9.3 of the Residential Design Guide. They do not maintain a continuous frontage and they do not complement the existing street scene or mimic existing building line. This development does not respect or enhance the quality of the local area. It does not constitute a well-designed and safe-built environment. It does not respect the strong rear building lines, and it does not pay any regards to the scale, massing, bulk, or density of the area. It is strongly felt this development will harm the character and appearance of the local area and is in direct contravention of these points. It is for these reasons the planning officer's recommendation to refuse must be upheld.
Again, thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Brenzini. That is the end of the speakers. We're back on site. Members, that is all of the speakers. Councillor White.
One of my questions was going to be how many trees were destroyed previous to this application, and I now have that answer, 180. How many of those trees had a TPO on them? And even if this application is refused, is there going to be any penalties to the developer or the owner regarding the loss of those trees?
There is no TPO on the trees on the site, and there are no penalties for the developer.
Trying to see any other members wish to raise a question or a comment. I can't see anybody. Please, if you do wish to. No, we can't see anybody. In which case, if there are no other comments to make, we have an officer recommendation with amendments as set out in the update. Is there a proposer and a seconder for that recommendation? As Councillor Lewis and Councillor Dugan, all those in agreement with the recommendation, and Mr. Scott will read out our names.
Councillor Graham Alloway.
Support the officer recommendation.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
Support the recommendation.
Councillor Paul Deach.
Support the recommendation.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
Support.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Agreed.
Councillor David Lewis.
Support.
Councillor Robin Perry.
Agreed.
Councillor Darryl Rataram.
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Morgan, you're muted.
Support the recommendation.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Support the recommendation.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Support the recommendation.
And lastly, Councillor Valerie White.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to the speakers. Now on to item 2 on page 37, which is 8 Techels Park, Camberley. On declarations, I've had a letter, and I assume everybody else has had, from representative of the Techels Park Residents Association, and I have to say, I have previously, some time ago, met with the applicant, but not on this application. Are there any other, Joe, move the screen back. Are there any other declarations to make? Someone have to shout out, I've lost you, you're on the other screen.
Did you want me to stop sharing?
I think that's fine. If any other members have any other declarations to make, please say them now. I presume that's a no then.
I put my hand up. This is Councillor Perry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was invited to a presentation by the owner about a year ago. Again, it did not feature this particular proposal.
Councillor Perry, can you just confirm that you've still got an open mind, however?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Any others? I'm going around the screen. No, thank you very much indeed. And Mrs. Bishop again, please. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Chairman. The application site is within Techels Park. These are the existing collection of buildings here. We have got 8 Techels Park here, the guest house which extends down and into here. You've got green hedges and dormy flat, which is a 2-storey part of the overall built frontage. We have Techels Court here, and we also have Dunmar here. The proposal before us this evening is for 9 houses. So we have 2 detached houses at the end, each 4 bedrooms. We have 2 pairs of 3-bedroom semis, and then we have a 2-storey building comprising of 3 flats. And this is the site. This is standing at towards the south of Techels Park, looking up. So you have got Dunmar here, you have Techels Park here, and then beyond you see towards green hedges and the guest house. This is standing at the northern end, looking south. So we have Dunmar here, Techels Park here, Techels Court here, sorry, and the side elevation of green hedges and the dormy flat. I would just point out the well-established heading along this boundary with number 7, 7A. This is Techels Court, as you can see, built in the mid-20th century. Pebble dash top, pitched roof, traditional red brick. Dunmar is a bit of an anomaly, really. It's a throwback to the previous use of the site as Techels Castle with the crenellation. I think it is a unique building within the park. And this is looking towards green hedges and the dormy flat here, the guest house. This is standing at the other end of the access road here, so it's looking back. So we have got 8 Techels Park here, the guest house here. If you notice, it is right on the edge of the carriageway here. You have the walled garden boundary wall there. You can just see some of the houses up there. And you have 5A Techels Park at the end. This is a view of 8 Techels Park. This is the tree that has been causing the very detailed work we've been doing on arboricultural protection. This is looking at the back of Dunmar in the open space as set out in the committee report. The area at the back of these buildings is just a big open space, and you'll see this in more detail. So we did go round, and then we see, again, there's Dunmar, that's the back of Techels Court. We're coming to the back of the guest house here, that wraps around the corner. You can just see the roof of green hedges and the dormy flat over there. And we skip around again, and then that's 8 Techels Park, and you can just see a little bit of St Francis Church and the church hall there. And this is an aerial photo that puts Techels Park in its context, or the site in its context. So you have the walled garden here, you have the church over here, you have 12 Techels Park here, and you have the main access through running down here. There is an update to the report. As you will see from the first paragraph, we've done some more work on clarifying the parking because there was a bit of a discrepancy there. So as you will see from the table, the proposal will provide 20 spaces but no visitor parking. The recommended guidance set out by Surrey County Council is for 16 spaces. So in terms of the overall parking provision, the scheme is acceptable, and we have no objection to the proposal on that ground. The applicant is if members are minded to grant planning permission, the applicant is very keen to start on site. So to this end, he is seeking to avoid pre-commencement conditions. So he's provided a lot of information in relation to construction and arboricultural method statements, which have been considered by both our arboricultural consultant and also the County Highway Authority. It's set out in some detail in the update. The submitted information is considered acceptable for the purposes of the condition. So consequently, there are updated conditions on the amendment sheet which address that, including an amendment to the approved plans condition. We have also come to the view that a further condition is required with regard to the semi-detached houses and the Juliet balconies at the back. And we are recommending a condition that seeks the use of obscure glazing to privacy level 5, which is the highest level of obscuring you can get for those balconies. As you'll also see from the amendment sheet, there is details of the energy efficiency proposals associated with this development. The recommendation is to grant subject to oh yes, and then I knew there was something I was missing. These are the houses that are proposed. If you note from the walled garden development, the proposal takes very much its design cues from there. As you can see, we have this kind of approach. So with the gables and the pitched roofs, the design approach for the flats is slightly different. It is sort of a more Georgian-y approach to design, but again, within the park, it would sit well, given the scale and form of other dwellings, larger dwellings within the park. These are the changes to Dunmar. It is literally separating it from Techels Court, which it currently is linked to, and blocking up windows just to improve the building relationship and the privacy between existing and proposed. The recommendation is as set out, subject to the revised conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Bishop. Very comprehensive. We have two speakers. The first one is Mr. Aggleton, who is objecting to the application, and then there's Mr. Dickinson in support. So if we can start, please, with Mr. Aggleton. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Peter Aggleton, and I'm speaking as Chairman of the Techels Park Residents Association. We acknowledge that this proposed development is largely within the footprint of the existing Techels Park guest house and do not have any objection to the principle of development on this site. We're told the greatest need in Surrey Heath is for 2- and 3-bedroomed houses. However, after a year, not a single such dwelling in the walled garden has been sold. This does challenge whether Techels Park is the right area for such development. The planning officer acknowledges that the application would not reflect a number of the guiding principles of the Wooded Hills housing character area. It is then asserted that the recently completed walled garden is a material factor in the assessment of this proposal. However, When granting approval to walled garden development, that planning officer considered that given the unusual and unique setting of the application site with the locally listed wall surrounding it, that an exception could be made to some elements of the character guidance. No such unusual or unique characteristics apply to this application. If one accepts the walled garden as a valid material consideration, then logically another 20 plus DPH development will be put next to it, and then next to that, and so on ad infinitum until Techels Park is another nondescript, densely populated housing estate. The planning officer also notes that existing buildings on the proposed site do not reflect a number of the guiding principles of the Wooded Hills housing character area either. Is this not an opportunity to insist that any replacement development on the site conforms to the council's own current guidelines? We note that the planning application for 10 Belton Road was refused, at least in part, due to its failure to meet the Wooded Hills character area guidelines. All we're asking is that the same consideration be applied to Techels Park. What is being proposed is a continuation of a very similar style of compact dwellings as the walled garden, totally unlike the rest of Techels Park. Moreover, the proposed development is also not separated from the rest of the park by a surrounding wall, as is the case with the walled garden, so there is not even that mitigation. This proposal fails to follow the natural slope of the land, and a number of these proposed dwellings are still considerably taller than in the walled garden. We would urge that if this application is approved, the scale of these buildings is reduced from 3 stories to 2 stories and the height reduced accordingly, as was agreed for the walled garden. In conclusion, although this planning application is largely within the footprint of an existing development, we believe that the opportunity now exists to insist that a redevelopment conforms to the SPD guiding principles of the Wooded Hills housing character area, including density. We reject the assertion that the granting of a planning application for the unusual and unique walled garden should be regarded as a material consideration. To now use it as a precedent would potentially enable a series of similar high-density developments to be proposed throughout Techels Park. Given other potential developments in Techels Park, we believe that now is the time for SHBC to make clear that all developments in the park must conform to the council's own planning guidelines, including the Wooded Hills housing character area, as an absolute minimum. We urge the council to refuse the current application and urge the developer to resubmit a proposal that is consistent with the planning guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Haggleton. I'm sure you are watching, and thank you for that. And now, can we have the video from Mr. Dickinson, please?
The redevelopment of previously developed land in a sustainable location. Good evening. This is an application to redevelop Techels Park Guest House, which has 22 bedrooms and 4 existing residential dwellings, to provide a replacement development of 5 houses and 3 apartments. The site is in the Wooded Hills housing character area, which is characterised mainly by detached houses in spacious plots. However, your officers point out that the group of existing buildings that includes the guest house are not typical of and do not make a positive contribution to the character of Techels Park. Officers highlight at paragraph 7.4.3 that these existing buildings have been built up in a piecemeal fashion and are of their time. I would say that they are a sprawling group of buildings that are poorly designed and tired. Even Mr. Aggleton, in his written representations to the application, acknowledges that from an architectural point of view, the demolition of the guest house would significantly improve the local environment. Officers note at paragraph 7.4.5 that the proposals would be largely within the footprint of the existing buildings and that they would reflect the existing street pattern. The maximum height of the development would be no higher than the existing guest house which is to be replaced. The design and materials for the 5 houses echo the quality of the recently completed residential development in the walled garden. The 3 apartments on the rear part of the site would reflect the style of the neighbouring property known as Dunmar. Your officers note that the development would maintain comparable separation distances and thus would retain a feeling of spaciousness to this part of Techels Park. They also highlight that the proposals would provide opportunities for new landscaping, particularly within the northern part of the site, which is currently largely devoid of any planting. Officers therefore conclude that the redevelopment of the existing group of buildings by the proposals would not harm this part of the Wooded Hills housing character area, and that it would maintain its spacious and sylvan character. We've worked positively with officers throughout both the pre-application and application processes. Paragraph 4.4 of the report lists a number of changes made to the proposals to address comments and suggestions made by officers and consultees during the application, which ensure that the scale of development is appropriate and that all existing mature trees and landscape features will be retained and protected. One of the changes made is to retain the existing boundary hedge and verge on the eastern side of the site alongside Techels Park unchanged and in its present position, thus negating the concerns raised by Mr. Aggleton. I understand officers will be advising the committee of a correction to the parking figures set out in paragraph 7.6.3 and will confirm that the level of parking proposed meets and indeed exceeds the council's standards. The existing parking area for the nearby church lies outside this application site and is not affected by the proposals. The officers note at paragraph 7.6.5 that the development will result in a reduction in traffic flows of around 50% compared to levels that could be associated with existing uses if they were fully operational. The proposals will provide electric vehicle charging points, and the site is within walking distance of the town centre via a public footpath. In conclusion, your officers support this application and consider there are no justifiable grounds for refusal. The proposals are sustainable development involving the redevelopment of previously developed land in a sustainable location and one which would make a contribution to the council's housing land supply. The developer is in a position to make an immediate start on the development as soon as the permission is issued, which would create employment across more than a dozen different trades and for around 25 local craftsmen, some of whom are currently furloughed. Members are therefore asked to approve the application in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Mr. Dickinson. That is all of the speakers. So, members, I will open to questions and comments. Who's going first? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a couple of questions for the case officer. The first question is, do we know the dates when the existing buildings on the site were constructed? And secondly, do we know the date on which the document that defines the Wooded Hills building character guidelines, when that was drafted and put into practice? Thank you, Chair.
The buildings that within the application site generally date from the 50s and 60s. That's generally when the main period of construction took place. The designated Wooded Hills is in the Western Urban Area SPD, and that is May 2012. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm ward councillor for this area, so I know it very well. I think it's really a great pity that this application doesn't reflect the character and feel that exists within Techels Park at the moment. It's not characterised by the high density buildings within the walled garden. 99% of the houses in that park are large individual houses in decent plots, and this is totally changing the character that exists at the moment. And I'm surprised that the officer hasn't considered that aspect in proposing approval. Maybe they'd like to comment on my comments.
Yes, I'm very happy to comment on this. When considering the application, one of the starting points is looking at the existing buildings that you have on the site, because obviously that's your starting position, and then looking at the degree of change as a result of the proposal. In terms of the height and massing of built form, the proposal is considered to be a visual improvement to what is there at the moment. I note from the comments from Mr. Aggleton that he's talking about the question of precedent. Precedent is not a material in how we determine applications. What is material is the fact that the buildings within the walled garden do form part and parcel of the character of the area. It is true to say that the majority of the houses within Techels Park are large detached houses in substantial plots. However, that is not true of the application site. The application site, by its very nature, is fundamentally different from the existing character of the large detached houses that you see within the park. Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler.
Hi, I'm very concerned about this development. I appreciate that we're now saying that it's an urban development, but it's an urban development right on the edge of the urban area, if you like, of Camberley. It's a fair walk into Camberley from there. The fact that the properties are quite small, it would be almost impossible to live there, for a couple to live there without having 2 cars. It isn't following the guidelines of the wooded development area, and I think that we have accepted that. And I think making reference to a potential loss of car movements on a 20 bedroomed guest house, which was very rarely used. Originally, it was was it the Theosophy Society, that the Theosophists that were there, was very rarely used. It was used more as a retreat than as a guest house. I appreciate that it could have gone on and been used as such. It's not in keeping with the other houses in Techels Park, and it seems to me that we're using something which was classified as being exceptional, i.e. within that brick walled development, as something which is now going to design the rest of this area, and it seems somewhat disingenuous with the previous application, where we've used the wooded character area as a reason for refusal, and yet we don't seem to be applying quite the same procedures here. So I'm afraid, as it stands at the moment, I can't support the officer's recommendation.
Yes, Councillor Wheeler, when Mr. Dickinson said there was a footpath into the town centre, I was slightly quizzical. I would like to ask the existing ward councillor if there is a footpath, but I'm not sure that he would have walked that, but maybe he that's not slightly unkind. Sorry, Robin, but maybe you know of its existence. Can I ask you that, Robin?
Yes, there is a footpath from the top of the edge of Techels Park that cuts down towards the town centre. I don't know, probably half a mile.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. Thank you. For members, those who may not remember, I'm going to say a year ago, but I'm sure it was longer than that. It has to be longer than that. We had an application at the end of Techels Park, numbers 1 to 8, I think it was, which we refused. It went to appeal, and then in between time, there was a subsequent fresh application made. And a lot of us would have parked around the area of the subject buildings and walk down to that side. It just puts it in context for those who were on the committee at that time. Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Jim. Just a quick question for the officer. I was just wondering if you could provide any information on if there's been any change in the built form of the development from the guest house to the proposed buildings. So like the percentage of how much of the land is going to be taken up by building, if that makes any. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I got it. So you're saying on are you talking about on the actual footage of the building?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
The development is pretty much on the footprint of the existing buildings. I can find. I'll see if I can find you a precise difference in floor area because I do have that somewhere. So I will come back to you on that one for me.
Page 63 of the agenda report also assists because it shows the proposed site layout, and in red you can see where the existing demolished buildings will be. So it gives you some idea of the coverage compared to the existing.
Does that help, Councillor Rise?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other comments, members? I'm looking to see if anybody's got a comment. Councillor Wheeler, were you indicating, or were you? Sorry, both hands, yes.
Sorry, yeah. So I suppose really it would just be interesting to have back from the officer the response to the fact that in the WUA.2 it says new development should not erode the existing positive character of the character area or reinforce existing negative features. And it's really how this development fulfills, I suppose, the objective there within this wooded urban area.
I think my response to that would be the existing buildings as they stand on the site do not make a positive contribution to the overall park. The park has a well-established sylvan character with a variety of designs within the built form of smaller houses. I think there's a bungalow down towards the other side of 7A, to the large, very detached mansions that you say, for example, at 5A. When you're talking about the impact on the character area, in my view, the proposal will be an improvement to the buildings that are there at the moment. It is a different part of the site. We're not saying that it is not different because it fundamentally is. And when you do a comparison with the scheme that we have before us, the overall height in terms of the building, in terms of the guest house in relation to what's being proposed, is the same. There will be a greater feeling of space because we will have rear gardens to the back of the houses. In terms of the area to the rear of the site, it will remain open. You will have parking that is integrated as part of the scheme. There will be more opportunities for landscaping. The trees and the hedging are generally safeguarded within the site. We have landscaping proposals which we will always take forward that again will reinforce the green character of the site. And in that respect, I think that in terms of us recognising it is different, the existing buildings are different, and that is where we start from, and we look at what is different. We're not saying that it's reflecting the wider character of Techels Park, which is the large detached houses, because it's not. It's fundamentally not. But what it is doing, it is replacing a complex of buildings that do not make a positive contribution to the area. They in themselves do not add value to the streetscape. The view is that the proposal will follow the design cues from the walled garden, although I would say that even if the walled garden were not there, my recommendation would remain as is, because you look at the existing buildings and what contribution they make, because that is what's being demolished and that is what's being replaced. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I have to say, knowing the development, having passed it on various occasions, and having read the report and listened to Mrs. Bishop just now, I have to agree that the existing hotel, when you looked at the pictures of it, the Pebble Dash, etc., it's I think the technical phrase, it is past its sell-by date, and a new development within that footprint will aid the environment greatly. It's my personal view. Are there any other comments? If not, Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've listened to all your comments about the justification, and they all seem to concentrate on what an eyesore the existing buildings are on this particular site. But as we've already established with my first question, The guidelines with regard to this type of building area, this type of community, have been applied well after these particular buildings were originally constructed. And it's quite clear that there were no such guidelines in place at that particular time. So at that time, pretty much anything could have been put on that site, and pretty much was. Whereas if today, those guidelines had been in place, and today we were proposing the exact buildings that are on the site now to be built again, we would reject that application for the very reason that it doesn't apply to the wooded area guidelines that are in place. So I'm sorry, but your arguments fall on deaf ears here, and I have to agree with my colleagues who feel that you failed to make your case that this proposed planning application is in any way acceptable by our own guidelines, and I will be joining them in voting against this particular recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
No, I appreciate that. It's Councillor Tapper. If there are no other further comments, we have an officer recommendation as amended. Is there a proposer and a seconder for that officer recommendation? Councillor Rise, is there a seconder? Councillor Dugan, and Mr. Scott, please.
Voting on the officer recommendation is amended. Councillor Graham Alloway.
Not in support.
So against, sorry.
Yeah.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
I'm against.
Oh gosh. Councillor Paul Deach.
Support.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
For.
Councillor David Lewis.
For.
Councillor Robin Perry.
Against.
Councillor Darryl Rataram.
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Agreed.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
Against the recommendation.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Against.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Against.
Councillor Valerie White.
Against.
The recommendation has been lost 7 votes to 6. We obviously need to vote. We need to bring forward reasons for refusal, which are planning reasons, and then before we take a vote on that, Councillor Wheeler.
So that it doesn't follow the guiding principle for developments of WUA 1 in terms of the scale and massing, building lines and roof lines of the character area. It's not in keeping with WUA 2 in that it doesn't help to not erode the existing positive character. And it doesn't add to the positive features of the area. It's not in keeping with, which one is it? Sorry. WUA 4, whereby that it should again be in keeping with the wooded area. So it's those 3 policies for me that it doesn't meet, and I know that the chair is likely to disagree with this one, but I do also feel that the parking is still very tight, given that we're stretching it a bit. I think calling it a sustainable location. I know that the county guidelines on parking are there, but I think we've all appreciated in the past that their guidelines are not great for areas that don't have good public transport.
Right. I started trying to not jot down what you were saying, but hopefully the officers have that because I haven't. Are there any other reasons? Councillor Tapper?
Yes, I'd like to echo Councillor Wheeler's comments and also add to that that in this particular planning applications, there are no such exceptional circumstances that have been used to justify similar planning applications on the same site. This one is not, in my opinion, available to use the exception that's been used previously. Thank you.
Just to clarify the 2 points, firstly, the parking issue and the exceptional circumstances. I'm not quite sure if Councillor Tapper could clarify what he means by that, because this is not a greenbelt location or anything like that. So we wouldn't apply very special circumstances on this site or anything like that. So it's just quite understanding in terms of character terms where he's coming from.
Yeah, now, when I said no exceptional circumstances, we were referring to the walled garden development, where the existence of the wall around this particular development was used as an exceptional circumstances to justify departing from the guidelines. As has been stated quite clearly throughout this presentation, there is, and it is accepted that there is no such exception applicable to this planning application.
But in terms of the reasoning that Councillor Wheeler has already said, that would be caught up in that reason in terms of your concern over the harm to the character, etc. I just want to come back on the parking side of things. Obviously, I accept your concerns over the parking, but this, in planning terms, this is a sustainable location. It's in the urban settlement. Additionally, you also have to look at what level of parking the committee allowed for the walled garden. Yes, you're looking at a different number of units there, but actually this is very comparable with what was permitted there. And actually, as the table shows on the update, you are going quite a bit higher than what the guidelines are in terms of the council's general guidelines. So I think that needs to be given consideration.
Are there any other fresh reasons for refusal you wish the committee to vote on? Are we happy with those reasons?
If we could ensure that the precise wording, we've obviously written down what members have said, but we will obviously agree to precise wording with the chair and vice chair. Also bring your attention in terms of the SAM as well, the issues in respect of that. At the moment, we had a legal agreement to confirm that. Yeah. That obviously, if that's not agreed, then there would have to be an additional reason in respect to SAM as well.
Right, I think we have that, and as Mr. Partington says, the final wording will be finalised myself, Vice Chairman and Ward Councillor. So do we have a proposer and a seconder for the refusal? Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Whitcroft, all those in agreement with the recommendation to refuse, and again Mr. Scott will run through. Thank you.
So this time voting on the alternative recommendation to refuse. Councillor Graham Alloway.
Yeah, I support the alternative recommendation.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
Agree.
Councillor Paul Deach.
Don't agree.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
Against.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Against.
Councillor David Lewis.
Against.
Councillor Robin Perry. Sorry, we didn't hear that. Councillor Perry.
Agreed.
Councillor Damarataram.
Against.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Against.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
Agreed.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Agreed.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Agreed.
Councillor Valerie White.
Agreed.
Yeah, so we're 8 to 6 in favour of that. Yeah. 8 sets in favour of the alternative
Yeah,
recommendation.
the recommendation to refuse is carried 8 votes to 6. So thank you very much indeed for that, members.
8 to 5, yeah.
Sorry, 8-5.
Yeah.
None of us can add up. Yeah, 8-5. I thought it was close, yes. Yeah. Right, thank you very much indeed, members. Now on to item number 3, which is the land to the rear of 154 Guilford Road, West End. Are there any declarations on this item, members? No, and it's Mr. Carty, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to a site within the Greenbelt, beyond the edge of the settlement of West End. This retrospective proposal is to provide 2 gypsy pitches, including a mobile home and touring caravan per pitch, on the site to the side and rear of the existing house with shared access onto Guilford Road. As you are aware, the application for the retention of mobile homes was to be reported in February, but was deferred to allow the receipt of further information. The officer's original recommendation was to refuse the application. The original report is provided after the update report on the agenda. However, in the light of the new evidence, the recommendation is now to approve the proposal for a limited period, as shown in the update report. Please note the updates, which I will refer to later, and I'll lead you through the photos and plans. The application site lies on the west side of Guilford Road, falling within the Greenbelt, located just outside the settlement of West End. The site fronts onto Guilford Road, close to the road junction with Kings Road. To the north, the residential properties lie to both flanks with open land at the rear. Land opposite falls within the settlement of West End. The site is wedge-shaped, reducing in width towards the rear. The plan to the right provides a wider plan which shows the west side of Guilford Road being more open, with the east side being more built up, reflecting the contrast between the settlement and Greenbelt land designations. The site location plan also includes, in blue areas, the land to the rear, and the plot for the existing house is taken out. An existing garage is also shown to the front of the existing dwelling, and the mobile homes are shown in this location on the GIS plan. This is the main house on the site, which is to be retained. These are the existing mobile homes on the site that are subject to this application. And this is the building to the rear of the site. Proposal is considered to be inappropriate developments, which would also have an adverse impact on the openness of this part of the Greenbelt and rural character. However, the new information relates to the personal circumstances of occupants of the mobile homes. These provide medical information which has been treated as confidential and is provided as appendices to the report which summarises this information. It is clear from this new information that there is a need for these occupants to remain within this accommodation for personal and health reasons. This weighs heavily in support of the proposal. National policy for traveller sites indicates that the best interests of the child have to be taken into consideration. In addition, the need for gypsy sites and the lack of supply also weighs in support of the proposal. Therefore, these amount to very special circumstances which outweigh the recognised harm. It has been considered that the application can be supported, but to make the permission personal to those whose need have been recognised and for a limited period of 5 years. Personal permissions are not normally applied, but there are exceptions in certain circumstances. It is considered that due to the personal circumstances that have been applied in this case, a personal permission can be made. The amended condition 4 on the update sheet reflects this requirement, limiting the occupation to include the persons whose needs have been demonstrated. It also secures the removal of the gypsy pitches if these persons if these pictures are not needed for these persons during the limited period. This permission has a limited period and therefore does not provide a permanent permission, and will allow reassessment towards the end of this time period in terms of the recognised personal need and the more general need for gypsy sites in the borough, as well as the prevailing policies at that time. The application is therefore recommended for a limited period permission, subject to the securing of a sound contribution. Please note the second recommendation if this contribution is not secured. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Carty. Members, can you just bear with me 1 second, please? Are we going to warn them if they want to go into debate?
I don't know if it's just me.
Edward, I apologise. You were on. I muted you when you went in discussions. I believe that somebody is going to just need to get up and just unmute that big screen. My apologies. I can't do it from here.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Edward. Carry on.
Where I got to. To start again, there are two elements to this report. There's the public element, and then there's the confidential private element on the yellow pages, as normal. If members are content to debate this without reference or going into detail on the Part B report, we can stay in public. If members wish to go into the second part, we will need to go into private debate and exclude the public from that debate. Now, the two parties who wish to indicate to speak, I will go with Councillor Wheeler first.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think that we can debate this without making a fairly detailed reference to the very special circumstances. So I, for one, would be very grateful if we could do that privately in part two.
Councillor Whitcroft.
I'd like to support Councillor Wheeler's comments, please.
Okay, can I get you to
okay,
read
members.
out that information?
That is. Do we want to get everybody else's decision on that, actually? Do we want to get agreement to that?
Yes, yes. So if you read out that and then ask for members to agree that resolution.
Okay, members, to resolve that, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during the discussion of the following reports under section 100A bracket 4 bracket of the Local Government Act 1972 on the grounds that the reports in question would be likely to involve disclosure of exempt information of the description specified in paragraph 1 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act. Now, members, are you agreeable to that statement?
Agreed.
Is everyone?
It looks, are there any against? Well, that might be the easiest because it looks as everybody else is in agreement to that. Right, you will have to bear with us for a short period whilst we come out of the public part of this meeting. So thank you, members.
Just bear with me, Chair.